Do I look limber? Do I? Do I look limber? If I look limber, phew, I'm gonna get this light out of there. Phew. If I look limber, it's because I just did some DDPY, some DDP yoga, some Diamond Dallas Page yoga. If you haven't listened to DDP's episode on my podcast, do yourself a favor. Do yourself a Google of DDP Spaniard podcast, and you're going to hear quite a stinking awesome interview. But then anyway, by way of Diamond Dallas Page, I got to meet Mark Merrow, and then I was able to have Mark Merrow on my show, which is the most downloaded episode on my podcast. So if you're a wrestling fan, even if you're a human fan, if you're a fan of good humans, you're going to want to check out those two episodes as well as every other episode on my show, to be honest, because we like to celebrate good humanity and awesome people and interesting people and opportunities to learn from those people. What the heck does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Well, DDPY. If I look a little limber, well, actually my neck's kind of tight. It's because I just did some DDPY, and I am ready to rock and roll with today's AMXbooks 624. What a rich book! What a rich book! And I haven't seen him sign on yet, but one Larry Moore. Thank you, Larry Moore, for being the first, the only contributor to Patreon. Patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. Thank you, Larry Moore. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. A hometowner, a supporter. I love it. All right, let's move on to today's AMX books. 1, 2, 3. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the Spaniard Show. This is the Spaniard, and this is AMX Books 624, Day 2 of reading and studying the book The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown. Subtitle, 9 Americans and Their Epic Quest for Gold at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Tremendous. I like to use the word rich when talking about books. This book is rich. There's depth. There's textures. There's probably 5 or 6 or 7 different storylines that all touch my soul as a human being, and they will touch your soul as well. I want to send a quick shout out and a big time thank you to one Larry Moore. So you've been hearing me talk about Patreon. Patreon is a way to grow the show. It's a way to create more content, to make more trips, to create more awesome content, interview more awesome guests, travel to more awesome places, and then bring it back to you, the listener. And a way for you to help support that is by Patreon, by my Patreon account, patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard, patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. A big thank you and shout out to Larry Moore. Larry is a hometowner. Larry's from my hometown. Larry is a daily follower on Facebook Live, a daily listener. Thank you, my friend, for stepping up and helping support the movement. Let's get back into the boat. The boys in the boat. Let's talk about the setting. And as I'm reading this book, one of the underlying themes that keeps smacking me in the face is this idea of tough times equaling tough people. Tough times equaling tough people. So this book is taking place right now where I'm at in the book. It's 1933. It's the 4th year of the Great Depression. 1 in 4 people in the U.S. had no job. Across the Atlantic, Hitler's Germany was rising to power. So not only is there this idea of, you know, the quest to win the gold medal, the crew, right? The crew that is on this boat who are loggers and fishermen and farm boys who really shouldn't have a chance, right? But then we have what's happening in the world across the Atlantic. Hitler's Germany is rising to power, and the book is going in depth about that, right? Like, we know what ended up happening, but to hear it at its start is just, it's super interesting to read about and to learn about. The world had no idea what was to come, and these are just 2 of the storylines that are present in this book. So Joe Rance, let's get back to the tough times equaling tough people. Joe Rance, who's our main character, the main man in the book, it says, quote, Joe understood cold reality. Remember, he's at the University of Washington. He found himself. He made his way there. And we'll get into the trials and tribulations that he had to fight through to get there. But, quote, Joe understood cold reality. He knew he might not belong here at all. And he certainly couldn't stay long if things did not go well in the shell house. So he was an outsider. Joe Rance was an outsider at the University of Washington. He didn't speak eloquently and properly. He didn't wear fancy clothes. High society was not his norm. Intellectual thinking and conversation was not his norm. It was not what he was used to. Quote, to fail at this rowing business would mean, at best, returning to a small, bleak town on the Olympic Peninsula with nothing ahead of him but the prospect of living alone in a cold, empty, half-built house, surviving as best he could. So we have this other idea of survival. So Joe Rance is at the University of Washington. He's an outsider. He doesn't have money. He comes from poverty. He's had a rough, tough childhood and upbringing. And he's in this new place with fancy clothes and cardigan sweaters and eloquent speaking and thought leaders and intellects and classes. And he knows that if I don't do this, if I, Joe Rance, don't do this, no one will do it for me. And I've got nothing. I've got nothing behind me. I can only look forward, eyes moving forward. Another interesting part of the book early on is this introduction to rowing. I know, like I said yesterday, I know very, very little about rowing. I know that when I drive on 76, the Schuylkill Expressway into Philadelphia, I see the row house, the boats, the houses along the river. That's all I know. But this is another storyline. That, quote, there were 1,001 small things that had to be learned, mastered, and brought to bear in precisely the right way to propel a 24-inch wide cedar shell carrying 3/4 of a ton of human flesh and bone through the water with any semblance of speed and grace. So I'm learning that rowing in the 1920s and 30s was an extremely popular sport, especially on the East Coast, in the Ivy League schools. Why? Because initially, the Ivy League schools learned of rowing from England, and it was brought over to the U.S. on the East Coast. And at this time, so you have all this adversity that Joe Rance is going through in his personal life, getting to the University of Washington, fighting for his spot at the University of Washington, but then also this idea, another subplot of crew not even being really popular or accepted on the West Coast because it's an East Coast sport. Right? So there's all these different things. It's this mix of brawn. This is what I'm learning about crew. So there's 8 men in the crew boat that we're talking about, this type of crew right here. It's a mix of brawn and intellect. So you've got to have the toughness, right? The raw, the toughness, the get after itness, the don't quit, the fighter's mindset, the get after it mentality. But you've also got to have intellect. So the sport, as I'm learning, is a perfect blending of those two things. And the men, the boys, right? The teenagers, the young men who are rowing this boat, they need to have a mix of this brawn and intellect. Pay attention to details, the craft of rowing, the art of rowing, the respect that Coach Ulbrichtson and everyone at the University of Washington rowing has for this art, for this sport. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about their coach, Coach Al Ulbrichtson. Now, I'm telling you this because I'm an aspiring leader, right? I do AMX, I do all this reading because I don't want to just put it out there in the world. I want to live it. I want to embody it. I want to be the foremost embodiment of lifelong learning and toughness and that idea of hard work and discipline and seeing things through in tough times. So when I read sentences like this about their coach, Al Ulbrichtson, it gives me chills up and down my spine. It touches my soul. Quote, he commanded enormous respect among his boys, but he did so almost entirely without raising his voice, almost without speaking to them. His words were so carefully chosen and effectively delivered that every one of them fell like a blade or a balm on the boy to whom they were delivered. So he didn't have to say much. And he didn't just have to say much, right? Because he walked in there and just didn't have to say much. It was his life. It was his livelihood. It was his being. This leadership, it was him. The energy that he gave off, the respect that he commanded, he earned it. He didn't demand respect. He earned his respect. He didn't have to say a word, and it was meticulous. You remember Mr. Rogers? Remember learn about Mr. Rogers and the meticulousness? It's the same with Coach Al Ulbrichtson. Oh, this has been AMXbooks 624. I can't wait for tomorrow. I can't wait to teach this tomorrow. If you'd like to help to support the show, you can participate. You can donate. You can help support the show for as little as $1 a month by going to patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard, Patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. You can check out charliespaniard.com to check out my speaking programs. If you're looking for a dynamic, high-energy, influential speaker, I know a guy. CharlieSpaniard.com/booking. And, of course, my reading list. Go read a book, folks. So, I can't. I was going to give you a... Wow, how about that, Chad? You know what? I read in the book Unplugged, he talked about his wife. I don't know if he specifically said rowing. I feel like if it specifically said rowing, I feel like I would remember that connection. I definitely remember him in the book saying she wasn't competitive, then went back to competition, etc. Wow, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, how about that? That's really cool. We're all adults here, right? So, actually, I'm going to upload this to YouTube. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'll see you all tomorrow for AMXbooks 625.